So what ended up happening next was probably one of my top five favorite moments of doing something with art that means something to someone else. And this really became like a core memory. So the pilot and the Wizzo is the backseat rider. It's the person who does different jobs in the fighter jet. The person up front does different jobs, and they work together. And so they both were a little bit older, and they wanted some of the older cartoons. And so I was doing Droopy the dog. I was going up, sir, going down, sir. This is the happiest day of my life. I was doing Marvin the Martian. Where was the kaboom? There was supposed to be an earth-shattering kaboom. Um, I would do. I ran through a whole cavalcade of them, and while I was doing that, I was instructing people to do things that had no relativity to anything because essentially, like, if you're going to be doing an ops check, normally there's stuff that you're going to be looking at. So to keep up the realism of this fake ops check, I went ahead and started commanding people to go around in different directions and just try to make it seem natural. Like, hey, look at this oil gauge. Hey, look at this tire. And then like you get dumber and dumber with it as it goes on. You're like, hey, look at this panel. And people are like, why? And you're like, because I said so. And since you're hooked up to comm, you can't question it because you don't know what's going on. So you just have this like weird amount of power. And so the pilot, in like a couple minutes in, is like, hey, we really need to start having them, like do stuff to make it look real. I was like, dude, I'm way ahead of you. He's like, dude, I love this. And he's like, I'm going to start moving the flight controls around so the people think that we're doing something. So yeah, so I told everybody to stay clear of the flight controls and moving all the ailerons and the rudders and everything. And I'm making all these big hand signals, and the whole time I'm just doing voices. I'm doing Gilbert Godfrey, just. And there I was, all the way in, and I just knew what I was supposed to do. And I mean, I'm just laying into it, and everyone on the site, the commander, the major, everybody is just enthralled because they 100% believe that I am just rocking it right now, right? And so I get done, I plug off a comm, and like crew chief knew me, so he knew something was up, but like he ain't saying nothing because he was just entertained. And I get on the truck, and right before I go to get on the truck, the commander comes rolling up, and he's so jazzed, and he's way to go, airman! And he salutes me, or asks, I don't know, like I think he started it first, but he was just super excited. And I just saluted right back, and I was like, yes, sir, absolutely. And I ended up getting onto the truck. We have a bread truck, is what we call it. So it's a truck with a big box back end that you sit on either side, like benches, the AC unit in there, and the cooler, and it's a whole vibe. And I jump in the back of the truck, and everybody's all piled in there, and everyone's like, "What was it?" Because they're interested. And I just told them, I was like, I just did voices for like 15 minutes, and they just lost it. They're like, "Are you effing kidding me, man?" And they just you got really, but they understood. They knew. They're like, it's kind of your jam. Um, and so this developed in so many interesting ways over the base, and there was one in particular. Um, I was so you have to remember we were on a combat deployment, and when you're on a combat deployment, you are dealing with a lot internally, and so the humor that you utilize in those arenas is not going to match up with what is considered social etiquette away from wartime. So when I say this, just keep in mind that this is a wartime thing, not a normal conversation joke. So I was working with a tough crowd. It's the way I'll put it. What I used to do is I'd ride a bus back and forth between work, and on the bus ride, I would do a little show sometimes because it was basically the same people. Like, you got to know the same people. You're there for a while. You might as well, like, yeah, entertain them. And so if I had energy at night, I'd be on the bus and it's nice and cool and it's dark, and I just start up, and being that I have Jewish heritage, there's a Jewish mother voice just naturally in me. And so I would do it, and I would talk to a technical sergeant. So I was an E4, he was an E6, and he would sit at the front of the bus, and I would always sit at the back, and I would heckle him from the back of the from the back of the bus, and he would raspily answer from the front as like my New York or Bostonian son, and I was the Jewish mom, and he was like 5'10", 245, mostly muscle and black, and I was like 6 foot 180, white, and I was the Jewish lady, and I was his mom, and he played it so well. I would be like, "Honey, are you up there? Did you eat your lunch I made you?" And he would just right on time, just, "Ma, stop it, Ma." And we did this bit, quite a bit, bing. And there was one day I remember, and it was by far the worst joke I think I've ever made as far as taste, and it was the only time I think I've ever made a group of people on a combat deployment all collectively like groan in disappointment, and I think that deserves to be retold. So we're on the ride one night, and I'm going through my whole list of like little phrases I do, and then I get this idea, and I said, I just start going on a monologue, and I was like, so I was talking to your aunt the other day, and we were discussing about, that spa that we both went to a while back, that had the fitness program and the dieting, and it was really intense. I think it was called Auschwitz, and the entire bus just, oh, and no one knows what to say at this point, right? Everyone's like completely shot, and I just jump right in. I said, "Oh, cut the shit, I learned a lot. I got very strong hands from it. I got into good shape. Little tough though. I never did get to take a shower." And and the groans just kept going, and I pulled back after that one. And from there on out, it was kind of established that like I had a screw loose somewhere. It wasn't my nickname. Actually, the other shift had provided me when I was out there was the nickname Chaos. That was my nickname. Ridiculous. Um, and then there was some other like really pivotal moments emotionally for setting up boundaries that got exercised on that deployment. There was an incident where I was working with my buddy Denny, and we were working on this part, and they the stand that we were on, it broke, and I think it was like a spot weld was like rusted or something like that. And so like everyone showed up and tried to like blame us for breaking it, and then we were like, we didn't. And then they saw the spot weld, and they're like, obviously that's what it is. And so it like all cleared up pretty smoothly, and we got a new stand, and we were working back on the jet. Nobody got hurt, and jet didn't get hurt, so it was like best of both worlds. And so we're thinking it's over, and then our flight chief rolls up, and he rolls the window down to his truck, and he says, "Airman Wiggins, what happened to the stand?" And me, again, with my combat humor, looked at the stand and looked directly at him and said, "Looks like it committed suicide, sir. To which he replied very, very calmly and collectively, and then invited me out of the kindness of his heart to his office in his tent, which I obliged rather quickly. I looked at Denny and I was furious. And he said, "What are you angry about?" I said, "Well, I made a joke and I just got treated like I punched someone in the face. So I'm going to go deal with it." And he was like, "I don't know if that's the best idea. I don't know if like going and picking a fight with the flight chief is a solid idea in the military." And I didn't care. I was pretty angry. So I'm storming down the flight line, and a couple of people that knew me knew that walk. They knew the stride, they knew the look, and so they tried to like pick me up in the truck and like talk me out of whatever it was I was about to do, and I just refused. I was like, "Nope, this is my path, and I'm sticking to it." And so I get to the office, and as soon as I get in, he comes barreling towards me, and he's just like immediately slinging it. And I was just like, I can't remember if I said like cut the shit or like I said something that just really cut the room. And he stopped, and I was like, "Dude, you don't know where we are at emotionally, like all of us. You have no idea. You don't know how close somebody is to snapping." And like, there's a lot of legitimate reasons to be yelling out here. That wasn't one of them. That was unnecessary. I was like, "Dude, like I used to be a real aggressive person." I was like, "You're so lucky I'm not like how I used to be. I would have just knocked you out." I was like, "That people can get hurt out here, dude." And he sits down and he's like, "You're absolutely right. Thank you for like calling me out. You gotta understand, this does not happen, not because it's like rude, but the approach of having to jump in that way to defend yourself rather than what would be considered like the proper way with like paperwork and sitting down and meetings and all the other things. We were like superseding all that tape, and that's normally not allowed unless it's serious. And so we're on deployment, so some of those things you just let go. And right as he's like agreeing with what I'm saying, I try to like throw in some chips on some other parts of the community that people have been complaining about. I'm like, "Well, do we have this other thing?" And he's like, "Ah, bah, 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 bah." I'm like, "Okay, all right, I'll back off." I'll back. So I did. And I I remember coming back, and I remember not being sure what to do. And I can't remember if it happened first that I met the burners first or I met uh or I had my chance to turn down my NCO testing, but I turned that down relatively soon after that, for personal reasons. And those I will discuss in person. Yeah. So so bouncing back again, because ping pong, the Las Vegas trip that I was speaking about before, there was a weekend where I I had this thing, if you can tell from the pattern thus far, of pushing things to the extreme and seeing what happens and if it sticks. And I was on a roll trying to see how long I could party for. And so, just to jump to the end really quickly, it ended up being 3 days, 3 full days of nonstop gambling, partying, um, getting lost, finding people again, NASCAR races, and other things. And so I will go into these individually now. So one of the evenings I went out, I was with a few of my friends from my unit, and we went to one of the casinos on the old strip, and we knew about quarter machines that were upstairs. And so we went up to these quarter machines, and in Vegas and in some casinos, not all casinos,